22-year-old Riley had been on her own for 4 years now. 4 long years since she aged out of the foster care system, with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a heart full of questions nobody would answer. Where did she come from? Why didn't anyone want her? Would life always feel this empty? She worked at Betty's Diner on 5th Street, pulling double shifts most days. The work was hard, her feet ached constantly, and the smell of grease clung to her clothes no matter how many times she washed them. But it paid the bills. Barely. Her studio apartment was the size of a shoebox with a kitchen so small she could touch both walls while standing in the middle. The radiator clanked all night in winter, and in summer the heat was unbearable. But it was hers, the first place that had ever truly belonged to her. Most nights Riley came home exhausted, heated up whatever leftovers she'd brought from the diner, and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. She'd watch other people's lives play out on her tiny television screen, families laughing together, friends going on adventures, people who belonged somewhere. Then she'd climb into bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering if this was really all there was. Work, sleep, repeat. An endless cycle with no one to share it with. She'd tried making friends over the years. Really tried. But there was always this invisible wall between her and everyone else. They had families to visit on holidays, childhood memories to laugh about, parents to call when life got tough. Riley had none of that. She'd learned early on that people didn't know what to say when she told them she grew up in foster care. They'd get that look in their eyes, that mixture of pity and discomfort, and the conversation would die right there. So she stopped trying. It was easier to be alone than to constantly explain why she was different, why she didn't have a mom to call on Mother's Day or family photos to share. November came in cold that year, the kind of cold that cuts right through your jacket and settles into your bones. Riley had just finished a brutal double shift, covering for another waitress who'd called in sick. Her feet were killing her. She had coffee stains on her uniform, and all she wanted was to get home and sleep. It was almost midnight when she finally locked up the diner. The streets were mostly empty, just a few cars passing by and the occasional person hurrying home. Rain had been falling all evening, turning the sidewalks slick and shiny under the streetlights. Riley pulled her thin jacket tighter and started the walk to her apartment just 3 blocks away. She usually took the main street, but tonight she was so tired she could barely think straight. The alley behind her building was shorter, would cut off a few minutes from her walk. She knew she probably shouldn't. Knew her landlord, Mrs. Park, always warned the tenants about taking shortcuts after dark. But it was just 3 blocks. What could happen? The alley was darker than the street, lit only by a single flickering light halfway down. Riley's footsteps echoed off the brick walls as she hurried through, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. She was almost at the other end when she heard it, a cry, faint but unmistakable. Riley stopped dead in her tracks, her heart suddenly pounding. It came again, a weak, desperate sound that made her blood run cold. It was a baby crying. For a moment she couldn't move. Her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe someone's apartment window was open, the sound carrying down to the alley. Maybe it was a cat. They could sound like babies sometimes. Maybe she was so tired she was hearing things. But the cry came again, and this time Riley knew. That was a real baby, and it was close. She turned slowly, scanning the alley she'd just walked through. The dumpster sat against one wall, overflowing with garbage bags. Stacks of cardboard boxes lined the other side, broken down and waiting for recycling day. And there, tucked between the dumpster and the wall, barely visible in the dim light, was a box. A cardboard box that was moving. Riley ran. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, just ran. Her tired feet forgot their pain as she dropped to her knees beside the box, her hands shaking as she pulled back the flaps. Inside, wrapped in a thin blanket so soaked with rain it was almost useless, was a baby. A tiny newborn baby with a scrunched-up face crying weakly. The infant's lips were tinged with blue, and Riley could see her little body shivering. "Oh my God," Riley breathed, the words barely a whisper. Oh my God, she'd never held a baby before. Never even been around one, really. But something deeper than thought took over. Riley scooped the infant up, blanket and all, and pressed her against her chest. The baby was so cold, too cold.
How long had she been out here?
Riley's apartment was right there, just through the back door and up 1 flight of stairs. She ran, cradling the baby carefully, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get her key in the lock, but finally she was inside. The apartment was warm compared to outside, But Riley knew it wasn't enough. She grabbed every towel she owned from the tiny bathroom, spreading them on her bed. Carefully, so carefully, she unwrapped the wet blanket from the baby. The infant was wearing a onesie, also soaked through and nothing else. No diaper bag, no note, no bottles, nothing. "It's okay," Riley whispered, though she had no idea if anything was okay. "It's okay, I've got you." She dried the baby with gentle pats, then wrapped her in warm, dry towels. The infant had stopped crying, which scared Riley more than the crying had. Was that bad? Should she still be crying? The baby's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but steady. Riley guessed she was maybe a day or two old, still had that newborn look. Someone had given birth to this child, and then left her in an alley in the freezing rain, left her to die. Riley sat on the edge of her bed, holding the small bundle close to her chest, and felt something crack open inside her. This baby had been abandoned, just like Riley had been abandoned, left alone in a world that didn't seem to want her. But Riley had found her. Out of all the people who could have walked down that alley tonight, all the people who might have heard that cry and kept walking, it had been Riley, someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be unwanted. The baby stirred against her, making a small sound. Riley looked down and saw the tiniest eyes looking back at her. They were dark, unfocused the way newborns' eyes are, but they were looking at Riley. Really looking. Something happened in that moment, something Riley couldn't quite name. It was like a door opening in a house that had been locked up for years, like sunlight breaking through clouds that had been gray for so long she'd forgotten what blue sky looked like. "I've got you," Riley whispered again, and this time she meant it. This time she knew it was true. The baby's little hand worked free from the towels, fingers no bigger than Riley's pinky. Without thinking, Riley offered her finger, and those tiny fingers wrapped around it with surprising strength. The baby held on like Riley was the only solid thing in an uncertain world. And maybe she was. Riley sat there for a long time, just holding this stranger's child who had somehow become the most important thing in her world. The clock on her wall ticked past midnight, then 1 in the morning. The baby fell asleep, warm now, safe now, breathing peacefully against Riley's chest. Outside, the rain kept falling. Cars passed by on the street below. The world kept turning like it always did, indifferent and cold. But inside that tiny apartment, everything had changed. Riley didn't know what would happen next, didn't know what she was supposed to do. All she knew was that for the first time in 4 years, maybe for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't alone. Someone needed her. This tiny, helpless person needed her, and Riley realized, as she held that baby close and felt her small, steady heartbeat, that maybe she needed this baby just as much. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the thin curtains of Riley's apartment. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. She'd spent the entire night sitting up in bed, holding the baby, watching her breathe. Every few minutes, Riley would check to make sure the infant's chest was still rising and falling. Terrified that something would go wrong, the baby had woken up twice, crying, and Riley had panicked both times. What did babies need? Food, obviously, but Riley didn't have any formula. She'd tried giving the baby small sips of water from a clean spoon, which seemed to help a little. The baby would suck on Riley's finger sometimes, searching for food that wasn't there, and it broke Riley's heart. As the sun came up, reality started to crash down on her. She had to call someone, the police, child services, somebody. This baby needed proper care, needed food and a doctor to check her over. Riley knew that, but every time she reached for her phone, her hand would freeze. She looked down at the small face, peaceful now in sleep, and felt that same fierce protectiveness that had taken over last night. What would happen if she called? They'd take the baby away, put her in the system, the same system that had failed Riley over and over again. Riley had lived in 7 different foster homes between the ages of 8 and 18. 7 different families who'd taken her in for the monthly check but never really wanted her. She'd slept on couches, in rooms with 4 other kids, in a basement once that flooded every time it rained. She'd been the kid nobody picked, the one who aged out with nowhere to go and nobody to care. The thought of this baby going through that same system made Riley feel physically sick. But keeping her wasn't an option, was it? Riley was 22, barely making rent, living in a studio apartment with no savings and no support system. She didn't know the first thing about babies. What was she thinking? The baby stirred, making small sounds, and Riley knew she was hungry. Really hungry this time. She couldn't put this off any longer. With shaking hands, Riley picked up her phone and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? Riley's voice cracked as she spoke. I found a baby. Last night in an alley. She was abandoned. She needs help. The next hour was chaos. Police officers arrived first, asking Riley a million questions. Where exactly had she found the baby? What time had she seen anyone? Riley answered everything truthfully, her arms wrapped protectively around the infant even as she talked. Then the paramedics came, gently taking the baby from Riley's arms to check her over. Riley felt like part of her soul was being ripped away as she watched them examine the tiny girl. The paramedics said she was dehydrated and underweight, probably born 2 or 3 days ago based on her umbilical cord, but she was alive, and that was because Riley had found her when she did. Another hour or two in that alley and the baby wouldn't have made it. Finally, the social worker arrived. Her name was Mrs. Chen, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a worn briefcase. She sat down at Riley's small table while the paramedics continued their work. You saved this baby's life, Mrs. Chen said softly. You should know that. What you did was incredibly brave. Riley nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She watched as the paramedics prepared to take the baby to the hospital for a full examination. What happens to her now? Riley managed to ask. Mrs. Chen sighed. She'll be placed in emergency foster care once the hospital clears her. We'll try to locate her birth mother, of course, but in cases like this... She trailed off and Riley knew what she meant. The mother was gone. Probably terrified, probably desperate, but gone. What if... Riley stopped, the words catching in her throat. The social worker looked at her, waiting. What if I wanted to take care of her? Mrs. Chen's expression softened, but there was something else there too. Hesitation, maybe, doubt. That's a wonderful impulse, and I can see you care about this child. But foster care is a long process. There's training, home studies, background checks. It takes months. I know, Riley said quietly. I grew up in foster care. I aged out 4 years ago. Understanding crossed Mrs. Chen's face. Then you know how hard it is. That's exactly why I want to do this. Riley's voice was stronger now. She stood up, moving closer to where the paramedics were bundling the baby up for transport. I know what it's like. I know how it feels to be passed around, to sleep in houses where nobody really wants you, to wonder every single day why you weren't good enough to keep. She looked down at the baby, who was awake now, those dark eyes seeming to focus on Riley's face. This baby deserves better than that. She deserves someone who's going to fight for her, someone who knows what it's like and will make sure she never feels that way. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, studying Riley. Finally, she spoke. You're young. You're single. You work as a waitress. The courts look for stability, financial security. I'm not trying to discourage you, but I need you to understand how difficult this would be. My whole life has been difficult, Riley said, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. I'm still here. I'm still fighting, and I'm not going to let this baby grow up feeling like nobody wanted her, because somebody does want her. I do. The social worker pulled out a business card and handed it to Riley. Come to my office tomorrow morning. We'll talk about what this process looks like, but I need you to prepare yourself. This could take 6 months or more. The baby will be in temporary foster care during that time, and there's no guarantee you'll be approved. Riley took the card, clutching it like a lifeline. I understand. I'll be there. The paramedics were ready to leave, the baby secure in a special carrier. Riley followed them to the door, unable to help herself. She reached out and gently touched the baby's cheek one last time. I'm coming back for you, she whispered. I promise. After everyone left, Riley's apartment felt enormous and empty. She could still feel the weight of the baby in her arms, could still see those tiny fingers wrapped around hers. She looked around at her shabby furniture, her stained carpet, her kitchen that barely functioned. The social worker was right. What did Riley have to offer? But then she remembered those 7 foster homes. The family who'd locked the food cabinets so foster kids couldn't steal snacks. The house where she'd shared a room with 5 other girls and never had a moment of privacy. The couple who'd sent her back after 3 months because she was too quiet, and they wanted a more grateful child. Riley might not have much, but she had something those people never had. She knew what it felt like. She understood the loneliness, the constant fear of being rejected, the hollow feeling of not mattering to anyone. She picked up her phone and called her manager at the diner. "Betty, it's Riley. I need to ask you something important." That afternoon, Riley sat in the tiny public library, using their computer to research foster care requirements. She filled out the initial application online, her hands shaking as she typed. She looked up parenting classes, read articles about infant care, made lists of everything she'd need to do. The social worker had said it would take months. Riley was going to use every single day. She picked up extra shifts at the diner, saving every penny she could. Betty, who'd always been kind to Riley, helped her figure out a schedule that would work once she started foster parent training. Her coworker, Linda, who had 3 kids of her own, offered to teach Riley the basics of baby care. The first training class was held at the Department of Children and Families on a cold Tuesday evening. Riley walked into a room full of couples, most of them older than her, many of them already with children. She felt out of place, young and alone, but she sat down and opened her notebook. Over the next weeks, Riley learned everything: how to prepare bottles, change diapers, recognize signs of illness. They covered child development, trauma-informed care, the importance of routine and stability. Every session, Riley took detailed notes, asked questions, stayed late to talk to the instructors. The hardest part was the home study. Mrs. Chen came to Riley's apartment with a checklist, examining everything. Riley had cleaned until her hands were raw, had bought cabinet locks and outlet covers with money she couldn't really spare. She'd borrowed a portable crib from Linda, set up a small changing station in the corner. Mrs. Chen walked through slowly, making notes. "You'll need to address the mold in the bathroom," she said. "And the smoke detector isn't working." Riley's heart sank. More money, more time, but she nodded. "I'll fix it this week." The personal interviews were even harder. Riley had to talk about her childhood, really talk about it in a way she'd always avoided. She told Mrs. Chen about being abandoned at a hospital at 5 days old, about never knowing her parents, never having baby pictures or family stories, about the feeling of being invisible, of not mattering. "Why do you want to foster?" Mrs. Chen asked during one session. Riley was quiet for a long time. "Because I know what it's like to grow up unwanted," she finally said. "And I know I can't change what happened to me. But maybe I can change what happens to her. Maybe I can be what I needed and never had." 2 months into the process, Riley got permission to visit the baby. She was being fostered by an older woman named Grace, who specialized in emergency infant care. Riley's hands shook as she knocked on the door, terrified that the baby wouldn't remember her, wouldn't know her. But when Grace placed the infant in Riley's arms, something magical happened. The baby, bigger now at almost 3 months old, looked up at Riley and smiled. Actually smiled. "She knows you," Grace said softly. "I don't know how, but she does." Riley visited twice a week after that, every visit making her more determined. She learned to feed the baby, to burp her, to change her diaper. She sang to her, read to her, held her close and whispered promises about the future they'd have together. 4 months after finding the baby in that alley, Riley sat across from Mrs. Chen in her office. The social worker had a thick file in front of her, Riley's entire application. "You've completed all the training," Mrs. Chen said. "Your home has been approved. Your background check came back clean. Your references all spoke highly of you." Riley held her breath. "There are concerns, of course. Your age, your income, your lack of family support, but..." Mrs. Chen looked up and there was something warm in her eyes. "You've shown remarkable dedication. You've done everything we've asked and more, and most importantly, it's clear that you love this child." Riley's eyes filled with tears. "Does that mean..." "It means," Mrs. Chen said with a small smile, "that you're approved for foster care." "You can bring her home next week." Riley couldn't speak. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, while Mrs. Chen went over the paperwork and the next steps. It wasn't adoption, not yet, but the baby was coming home. After 4 months of fighting, of working, of hoping, the baby was coming home. That night, Riley sat in her apartment looking at the small corner she'd prepared. The borrowed crib, the second-hand clothes Linda had given her, the bottles and formula she'd been stockpiling. It wasn't much, but it was filled with love, and that had to count for something. In 1 week, her life was going to change forever. She was terrified, but she was also ready. Because sometimes the people who have the least to give are the ones who give the most. And Riley was ready to give this baby everything. The day Riley brought the baby home was both the best and most terrifying day of her life. She stood in Grace's living room, holding the infant carrier with shaking hands, while Grace went over instructions for the 100th time. Feeding schedule, sleep routine, when to call the doctor, what to watch for. Riley nodded at everything, but her mind felt like it was swimming. "You're going to be fine," Grace said, placing a gentle hand on Riley's shoulder. "Trust yourself. You know this baby, and she knows you." Riley looked down at the little girl in the carrier. 4 months old now, with a full head of dark hair and those same watchful eyes. The baby looked back at her, and Riley felt that familiar rush of love mixed with absolute terror. What if she messed this up? What if she couldn't do it? But then the baby smiled, that gummy, whole-face smile that babies give, and Riley knew there was no turning back. This was happening. They were going home together. The first night was a disaster. Riley had read all the books, taken all the classes, but nothing prepared her for the reality of being alone with a 4-month-old. The baby cried, and Riley tried everything. Bottle? She'd just eaten an hour ago. Diaper? Clean. Too hot? Too cold? Sick? Riley's hands shook as she checked the baby's temperature, convinced something was horribly wrong. Finally, at 2 a.m, Riley called Linda in tears. "I don't know what I'm doing. She won't stop crying. What if something's wrong with her?" Linda, bless her, didn't sound annoyed at being woken up. "Is she pulling at her ears? Does she feel hot?" "No. She just keeps crying. Sometimes babies cry, honey. Sometimes they're just fussy. Have you tried walking with her?" Riley hadn't. She picked up the baby and started pacing her tiny apartment, bouncing gently the way Linda had shown her. Slowly, gradually, the crying turned to whimpers, then stopped altogether. The baby's eyes grew heavy, and within minutes she was asleep against Riley's shoulder. Riley stood there for another 20 minutes, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Her arms ached and her eyes burned with exhaustion, but the baby was finally sleeping. She carefully, so carefully, lowered the infant into the crib and collapsed onto her own bed fully clothed. She'd been asleep maybe an hour when the crying started again. Those first weeks were brutal. Riley was exhausted in a way she'd never experienced. The kind of tired that made her forget what she was doing mid-action, that had her putting the milk in the cabinet and the cereal in the fridge. She went back to work at the diner, but now she was constantly distracted, worried about the baby who was with a daycare provider Mrs. Chen had approved. Money was even tighter than before. Diapers were expensive. Formula was expensive. The special, hypoallergenic formula the baby needed because regular formula upset. Her stomach was really expensive. Riley started skipping lunches, eating whatever was about to be thrown out at the end of her shift at the diner. She wore the same 3 outfits on rotation because buying herself new clothes wasn't an option. Her landlady, Mrs. Park, who lived in the apartment below, came up one evening looking concerned. "Riley, the baby cries a lot at night. Other tenants complain." Riley felt panic rise in her chest. She couldn't lose this apartment. Where would they go? "I'm sorry, I'm trying everything. She's got colic. The doctor says it'll pass, but—" I know. Mrs. Park said, her stern face softening. "I have 3 children, I remember. Here." She handed Riley a small container. "Korean herbal tea. My mother gave it to me when my babies had colic. You drink it, not the baby, and it comes through the milk. But you're not nursing, are you?" "No, I can't. I'm not her birth mother." Mrs. Park nodded. "Then put a little in her bottle, just a tiny bit. Mix with the formula. Helped my youngest." She paused at the door. "You're doing good job. Hard job, but good job." After Mrs. Park left, Riley sat on the couch and cried. She was so tired, so overwhelmed. And for what? The baby wasn't even legally hers. She was just a foster parent. Mrs. Chen had explained that the birth mother could come back, could claim her baby, and Riley would have to give her up. 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, and Riley might lose her anyway. What was she thinking, believing she could do this? The baby woke up from her nap, making those small sounds that came before crying. Riley wiped her eyes and went to pick her up. The moment the baby was in her arms, curled against her chest, Riley knew exactly what she was thinking. This was her daughter. Maybe not by blood, maybe not even legally yet, but in every way that mattered. "We're going to figure this out," Riley whispered into the baby's soft hair. "I promise." Slowly, things got a little easier. The colic started to fade around the 5-month mark. The baby began sleeping for longer stretches at night. Riley got better at reading her cues, knowing the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry. They developed routines: bottle at 6, bath at 7, stories and songs before bed at 8. Linda became Riley's lifeline. She showed up at Riley's apartment one Saturday with bags full of hand-me-down clothes, toys her own kids had outgrown, even a high chair that was still in good condition. "My kids don't need this stuff anymore, and you can't afford to buy everything new. Take it." Riley hugged her, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "You're doing fine," Linda said firmly. "Better than fine. That baby is lucky to have you." The foster parent support group Mrs. Chen had recommended became Riley's weekly lifeline too. Every Thursday evening, she'd pack up the baby and go to the community center where a dozen other foster parents gathered. Some had multiple kids, some were dealing with teenagers, some were older couples who'd been fostering for decades. Riley was the youngest by far and the only single parent, but nobody judged. If anything, they admired her. A woman named Patricia, who was fostering 3 siblings, took Riley under her wing. She taught her practical things the classes hadn't covered: how to make formula last longer, where to get free diapers from the church donation program, which pediatrician in the area had sliding scale fees. "This system isn't set up to make things easy," Patricia told her one evening while the kids played on the floor. "You've got to learn to work the system, find the resources, ask for help when you need it. Being stubborn and proud doesn't feed babies." Riley learned to accept help. She learned to shop sales, to stretch every dollar, to make do with less. She learned that the baby didn't care if her clothes came from a thrift store or if her bottles were generic brand. The baby just cared that Riley was there, that she was fed and warm and loved. When the baby was 6 months old, Riley took her to the doctor for a checkup. The pediatrician, Dr. Rodriguez, examined her thoroughly, then looked at Riley with approval. "She's thriving," he said. "Good weight gain, hitting all her developmental milestones. You're doing an excellent job." Riley felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Really?" "Really." Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "I've seen a lot of kids come through the foster system. Not all of them look this healthy and happy. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That night, Riley sat on the floor playing with the baby. At 6 months old, she was sitting up on her own, grabbing at everything, making babbling sounds that were almost words. Riley would hand her a toy and the baby would laugh, that pure, joyful baby laugh that made everything worth it. "What should we call you?" Riley wondered aloud. The baby was still listed in the system as Baby Do. It felt wrong, not having a name, but Riley had been afraid to name her, afraid of overstepping, afraid of claiming something that might not be hers to claim. The baby looked at her and said, "Baba Baba," reaching chubby hands toward Riley's face. "How about Lily?" Riley suggested. "It's simple, pretty. A flower that grows even in tough conditions." She picked up the baby, holding her close. "What do you think, sweet girl? Want to be Lily?" The baby grabbed Riley's hair and yanked, which Riley took as agreement. From that day on, she was Lily. Riley didn't have the authority to legally name her, but in their home, in their life, she was Lily. Mrs. Chen raised her eyebrows when Riley mentioned it during the next check-in, but didn't say anything against it. As Lily grew, so did Riley. She got better at managing on little sleep. She learned to cook simple, cheap meals with one hand while holding the baby in the other. She became an expert at cleaning up spit-up, at changing diapers in impossible places, at soothing nightmares with just her voice. More importantly, she learned she was stronger than she'd ever known. Every time she wanted to give up, every time the exhaustion or the worry or the money stress became too much, she'd look at Lily and find the strength to keep going. This tiny person was counting on her. Failure wasn't an option. When Lily was 8 months old, Mrs. Chen came for a home visit. It was routine, something that happened every few months, but Riley still cleaned like crazy beforehand. Mrs. Chen walked through the apartment making notes, asking questions about Lily's routine, her development, any concerns. "I have to tell you," Mrs. Chen said as they sat down at Riley's small table. "When you first told me you wanted to foster, I had serious doubts. You were so young, so alone, with so little support." Riley's heart sank. This was it. They were taking Lily away, but, Mrs. Chen continued, "I was wrong. You've exceeded every expectation. Lily is healthy, happy, and clearly bonded to you. You've taken every parenting class we've offered, joined the support group, stayed in constant communication with me. You've done everything right, so she can stay." "She can stay," Mrs. Chen smiled. "In fact, I wanted to talk to you about something else. Lily's birth mother was never identified. No one has come forward. After a year in foster care, if that continues, you'll be eligible to file for adoption." Riley couldn't breathe. Adoption. Making Lily legally, permanently, forever hers. "That's 4 more months," Mrs. Chen said. "A lot can happen in 4 months. But I want you to be prepared. If you want to adopt her, we'll need to start the paperwork." After Mrs. Chen left, Riley sat on the floor with Lily, who was playing with blocks, knocking them down and laughing each time they fell. 4 more months? 120 days. And then maybe, just maybe, this baby would really be hers. You hear that, Lily girl? Riley whispered, pulling the baby into her lap. "You might be stuck with me forever." Lily looked up at her and said something that sounded almost like Mama. It was just babbling, Riley knew that. Babies this age made all sorts of sounds, but Riley's eyes filled with tears anyway. Because someday soon, maybe someday very soon, that's exactly what she'd be. Not the foster parent. Not the temporary guardian. Mama and Riley, who'd spent her whole life feeling unwanted and alone, who'd never had anyone call her family, was going to make sure Lily never felt that way. Not for one single day of her life. They didn't have much. Their apartment was small, their furniture was secondhand, their toys were hand-me-downs. But they had each other, and somehow that was everything. The day Lily turned 1 year old was a day Riley never thought would come. Not just the birthday itself, but what it meant. 1 full year in foster care with no birth parents coming forward. 1 year of Riley proving she could do this. 1 year of falling more deeply in love with this child than she ever imagined possible. And according to Mrs. Chen, it meant Riley could officially file for adoption. Riley celebrated Lily's birthday at her apartment with Linda and her kids. Patricia from the support group with her foster children, Mrs. Park from downstairs, and a few co-workers from the diner. It wasn't fancy. Riley had baked a small cake herself, using a recipe Linda had given her and decorated with clumsy frosting flowers. She'd found a second-hand dress for Lily at the thrift store, pale yellow with small daisies on it. When everyone sang happy birthday and Lily smashed her little hands into the cake, getting frosting everywhere and laughing with pure joy, Riley felt her heart might burst. This was family. Not the traditional kind, not the kind she'd always dreamed of as a kid in foster care, but family nonetheless. People who showed up. People who cared. After everyone left and Lily was down for her nap, Riley sat at her table with the adoption papers Mrs. Chen had given her. They were intimidating. Pages and pages of legal language, background information, financial disclosures. Riley read through each page carefully, her hand shaking as she signed her name, Riley Ann Thompson. Petitioner for adoption, it felt surreal. A year ago, she'd been alone in this apartment, living day to day with no purpose beyond survival. Now she was trying to become someone's legal mother, someone's forever family. The process wasn't quick. There were more home visits, more interviews, court dates that got postponed, paperwork that needed to be refiled. Riley learned patience she never knew she had. Every night she'd put Lily to bed and whisper, "Soon, baby girl. Soon you'll really be mine." Lily was changing so fast it made Riley's head spin. At 13 months, she took her first wobbly steps and Riley cried like it was the most important moment in history. She started saying real words. Mama for Riley, ba for bottle, no, which quickly became her favorite. She had opinions about everything, from what she'd wear to what she'd eat, and she wasn't shy about expressing them. Riley loved every stubborn, exhausting moment of it. Work became harder to balance. Betty had been understanding, but Riley had to call in a few times when Lily got sick. Daycare wouldn't take her with a fever, and Riley didn't have anyone else to call. Each time she missed work, she felt that familiar panic. What if Betty got tired of it? What if she lost her job? How would she support Lily then? One particularly bad week, Lily caught some virus from daycare. High fever, throwing up, clingy and miserable. Riley had to miss 3 shifts in a row. When she finally came back to work, exhausted and anxious, Betty called her into the office. Riley's stomach dropped. This was it. She was getting fired. "Sit down," Betty said, and her tone wasn't angry, just tired. Riley sat, preparing for the worst. "I can't keep doing this," Betty said, and Riley felt her world crumbling. "I can't keep scheduling you for shifts and not knowing if you'll be able to make it. I've got a business to run and I need reliable staff." "I know," Riley said, tears already forming. "I'm so sorry. I'll find someone to be on backup when Lily's sick. I'm not finished," Betty interrupted. "I can't keep doing this, so here's what's going to happen. I'm changing you to part-time, 25 hours a week. You'll work only when Lily's in daycare. No more evening or weekend shifts. It's less money, I know, but it's reliable. You'll be here when I need you, and you'll be home with your daughter when she needs you." Riley stared at her. "But I can't afford to live on part-time wages, which is why I'm also promoting you to shift supervisor. Better hourly rate. And Linda's agreed to watch Lily sometimes if you need extra hours during the week." Betty's stern face softened just a little. "I see how hard you're working, kid. I'm not trying to make your life harder. I'm trying to make it work." Riley couldn't hold back the tears anymore. This woman, her boss who'd always been a bit gruff and no-nonsense, was throwing her a lifeline. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you so much." The new schedule helped, but money was still desperately tight. Riley sat up late at night doing math, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. Rent, utilities, daycare, food, diapers, formula. Lily was still on formula for 1 bottle before bed. It all added up to more than Riley made. She started selling things she didn't need, the old TV that barely worked anyway, some clothes she never wore, a few books from a long-ago attempt at a collection. Mrs. Park noticed Riley looking stressed and offered to lower the rent slightly. "You keep the place clean, you're quiet, you pay on time," she said. Good tenant. Worth keeping. It was $50 less a month, but it felt like a fortune. Lily didn't know about any of the struggles. She just knew that Mama was there when she woke up, that there was food when she was hungry, that she had toys to play with and books for bedtime. She was happy, healthy, growing like a weed. That was what mattered. Around 16 months, Lily started getting more verbal. Not full sentences yet, but more and more words. She'd point at things and name them. Dog, ball, cookie. When Riley came home from work, Lily would toddle to the door yelling, "Mama, mama, mama," with her arms up, demanding to be picked up. Every single time, Riley's heart melted. She'd scoop Lily up, hold her tight, and think about how close they'd both come to never having this. If Riley hadn't taken that shortcut through the alley, if she hadn't heard those weak cries, if she'd been too scared to try fostering, they'd both be alone right now, both missing the other person who made life make sense. The adoption hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. Mrs. Chen called to tell Riley the date, and Riley had to sit down, her legs suddenly weak. This was it. This was really happening. She didn't have money for a lawyer, but Mrs. Chen said the court would provide one since it was a foster-to-adopt case. The lawyer, a young woman named Kate, met with Riley a week before the hearing to prep her. "The judge will ask you questions about your ability to provide for Lily," Kate explained. "Your financial situation isn't ideal, but you've been managing for over a year now. That counts for a lot. What if they say no?" Riley asked, the fear she'd been holding back finally surfacing. "What if they decide I'm not good enough?" Kate looked at her seriously. "I've read your file, Riley. I've seen Mrs. Chen's reports, the daycare provider's statements, the pediatrician's records. Everything shows that Lily is thriving in your care. You've done everything right. The judge would have to have a very good reason to deny this adoption, and I don't see one." But Riley couldn't shake the fear. What if they saw what she saw when she looked in the mirror? A 23-year-old kid with no family, no college degree, barely making ends meet. What if they decided Lily deserved better? The night before the hearing, Riley couldn't sleep. She kept getting up to check on Lily, watching her sleep peacefully in her crib. those long eyelashes resting on her cheeks, her thumb in her mouth even though Riley was trying to break that habit. This child was her whole world. The thought of losing her was unbearable. The morning of the hearing, Riley dressed carefully in the one nice outfit she owned. Black pants and a simple blouse she'd bought from the thrift store for this occasion. She dressed Lily in the same yellow dress from her birthday party, carefully combing her dark curls. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble floors and high ceilings and important-looking people in suits. Riley held Lily on her hip, feeling small and out of place. Linda had come for moral support and Mrs. Chen met them in the hallway outside the courtroom. "How are you feeling?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Terrified," Riley admitted. "That's normal. But you've got this. Just answer honestly, speak from your heart." The judge can see what's in front of her. When they were called into the courtroom, Riley's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The judge, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a kind face, looked down at them from the bench. Kate stood and presented the case, going through all the facts. How Riley had found Lily abandoned as a newborn. How she'd immediately pursued foster care despite her young age and limited resources. How she'd completed every requirement, attended every training, passed every inspection. How Lily had thrived under her care for 16 months now. Then it was Riley's turn to speak. The judge asked her questions and Riley answered as honestly as she could. Yes, money was tight, but they managed. Yes, she was young and single, but she had a support system. Yes, she worked, but she'd arranged her schedule to be there for Lily. "Why do you want to adopt this child?" the judge asked. Riley looked down at Lily, who was being remarkably good, playing quietly with a toy in Riley's lap. "Because she's my daughter," Riley said simply. "Not because I gave birth to her, but because we saved each other. I know what it's like to grow up in the system, to feel like nobody really wants you. I spent 18 years feeling that way. I don't want Lily to ever, not for 1 second, feel unwanted. I want her to know that someone chose her, that someone fought for her, that she matters." The judge was quiet for a moment, studying them. "Miss Thompson, I've reviewed your file extensively. Your financial situation concerns me. Single parents face significant challenges and you're starting from a very difficult position." Riley's heart sank. This was the no. This was where they took Lily away. "However," the judge continued, "I've also seen the reports from Child Services. Lily is healthy, happy, and clearly bonded to you. You've demonstrated remarkable commitment and responsibility. You've created a stable home environment on limited resources. Most importantly, it's clear that this child is loved." The judge looked at Lily, who chose that moment to look up at the judge and wave, saying, "Hi." In her tiny voice, a smile crossed the judge's face. "It's also clear that Lily loves you back. And that, Miss Thompson, is what matters most." She picked up her gavel. "I'm granting the petition for adoption. Lily is now legally your daughter." The gavel came down and Riley burst into tears. Linda was crying. Mrs. Chen was crying. Even Kate was wiping her eyes. Riley held Lily close, crying into her hair, unable to believe it was real. "You're mine," she whispered. "You're really, truly mine." Lily patted Riley's face, concerned by the tears. "Mama crying?" "Happy tears, baby. The happiest tears." After the hearing, they went to a small diner to celebrate. Linda insisted on paying, getting them all lunch and a slice of pie. Lily made a mess with her grilled cheese, getting crumbs everywhere, and Riley didn't care one bit. Her daughter. Her legal, official, forever daughter. That night, after Lily was asleep, Riley sat in her small apartment looking at the official adoption papers. Lily's name was now legally Lily Rose Thompson. Riley had given her a middle name, Rose, because roses grew through concrete, beautiful and strong despite everything. Just like both of them. Life was still hard. Money was still tight. Riley was still young, still learning, still figuring things out day by day. But none of that mattered as much as this. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a daughter. She had a family. She had a purpose. And somewhere in heaven or wherever foster kids' prayers went, maybe the little girl Riley used to be, the one who'd felt so unwanted and alone, was finally at peace. Because that little girl had grown up to make sure another child would never feel that way. Riley Thompson might not have much, but she had everything that mattered. 2 years after the adoption, Riley stood in the same alley where she'd found Lily. It was a warm afternoon in late spring, and she held 3-year-old Lily's hand as they looked at the spot where that cardboard box had been. "This is where you started, baby girl," Riley said softly. "This is where everything changed." Lily looked around with the casual curiosity of a toddler. "Why was I here, Mama?" Riley knelt down to Lily's level. They'd talked about this before. In simple terms, a 3-year-old could understand. "Your first mama couldn't take care of you, so she left you somewhere I would find you. And I did find you. And I loved you so much that I became your forever mama." "You saved me," Lily said, repeating what Riley had told her many times. "We saved each other," Riley corrected gently. It was true. Riley barely recognized the person she'd been 3 years ago. That exhausted, lonely waitress going through life on autopilot, wondering if anyone would even notice if she disappeared. Now she woke up every morning with purpose. Now she mattered to someone. Life was still a constant juggle. Lily was in preschool now 3 mornings a week, which helped. Riley was still working at the diner, still living in the same small apartment, still counting every penny. But things had slowly gotten better. Last year, Riley had done something that terrified her. She'd enrolled in community college. Just one class to start, Introduction to Social Work, taking it online in the evenings after Lily went to bed. She'd been out of school for 5 years, had barely graduated high school while bouncing between foster homes. The idea of going to college seemed impossible, but Linda had encouraged her. "You're already doing the work," she'd said. "You know the system. You know what these kids need. Make it official." That first class was brutal. Riley felt stupid behind, overwhelmed. She'd write papers while Lily slept, researching on her phone because she couldn't afford a laptop. She'd take exams at the kitchen table at midnight, fighting exhaustion, questioning if she could really do this. Then she'd gotten her first grade back, an A-. The professor's comment at the bottom read, "Your personal insights on the foster care system are invaluable. Please continue sharing your perspective." Riley had stared at those words for a long time. Valuable. Her experience, her pain, her survival was valuable. She'd taken 2 classes the next semester, then 3. It was slow going, and it would take her years to finish a degree this way, but she was doing it. Riley Thompson, high school graduate with no family and no advantages, was going to college. The daycare director, Ms. Patel, had noticed Lily's progress and pulled Riley aside one day. "Has Lily been in any early intervention programs? Her language skills are exceptional for her age." Riley felt a surge of pride. "No, just what we do at home. We read a lot. I talk to her constantly. It shows," Ms. Patel said. "You're doing an amazing job with her. Have you ever thought about working with children professionally?" The question stuck with Riley. She already knew she wanted to work in social services, wanted to help kids in foster care. But maybe there was more she could do. She started volunteering at the foster parent support group, sharing her story with prospective foster parents. The first time she stood up to speak, her hands shook and her voice wavered. But then she looked around the room and saw people who needed to hear what she had to say. "I was in foster care from age 8 to 18, Riley began. "I aged out with nothing. I know how hard the system can be. But I also know that one person who really cares can change a kid's entire life." She told them about finding Lily, about being terrified she wasn't good enough, about the struggles and the late nights and the moments she wanted to give up. "But here's what I learned," she said. "Kids don't need perfect. They need present. They need someone who shows up, who stays, who loves them on the hard days and the easy days. That's what makes a family." After she spoke, several people came up to thank her. One woman was crying. "I've been so scared that I'm not good enough," the woman said. "But hearing you, it gives me hope." Riley hugged her. "You've got this. And when it gets hard, reach out. We're all in this together." That became Riley's new purpose. She kept taking classes, kept working toward her social work degree. She kept volunteering, kept sharing her story, kept encouraging other foster parents, and she kept being the best mom she could be to Lily. Lily was thriving. She was smart, funny, stubborn, and loving. She had Linda's kids as honorary cousins, Mrs. Park as an honorary grandmother, Patricia's foster kids as friends. She had birthday parties and playdates and a bedroom full of secondhand toys that might as well have been treasure.